It was a bright morning in the quiet village of Mabala, where everyone knew everyone. Children played near the river, mothers pounded cassava in large wooden mortars, and fathers prepared fishing nets. Life in Mabala was simple and peaceful. But everything changed on the day she arrived. A woman dressed in a flowing red gown, her face hidden behind a red veil, walked into the village square. Her presence was strange and mysterious. She carried a small wooden box tied with a golden rope. The villagers stopped what they were doing and stared. Elder Kanda, the oldest and wisest man in Mabala, stepped forward. "Stranger, who are you, and what brings you to our village?" he asked. The woman spoke softly, her voice like a gentle breeze. "I am here to offer both a blessing and a warning. But first, I must meet the village chief." Chief Kapsawa, a tall man with a deep voice, stepped out of his hut. "I am Chief Kapsawa. Speak, woman, and let us hear your message." The woman bowed her head slightly. "Inside this box lies something powerful. It can bring great fortune to your village, but it can also bring ruin. Only those with pure hearts must approach it. Do not open it without my permission." Whispers spread among the villagers. Some were curious, others were frightened. The woman handed the box to the chief and said, "I will return in 3 days to see what you have chosen. Until then, guard this box with your lives." With that, she turned and disappeared into the thick forest beyond the village. For 2 days, the box sat untouched in the chief's hut. The villagers talked about it endlessly. What could be inside? Gold, jewels, magic. On the third night, Posori, one of the village elders, could no longer hold his curiosity. He crept into the chief's hut while everyone was asleep. "Just one little peak won't hurt," he whispered to himself. With trembling hands, he untied the golden rope and slowly opened the box. A bright light burst from inside, and a loud whisper filled the air. "You were warned." Posori froze, his face pale with fear. Suddenly, he slammed the box shut and stumbled out of the hut. The next morning, Posori was found lying by the river, unable to speak. His eyes were wide with terror. The villagers gathered around him, and Chief Kapsawa knew something terrible had happened. The village of Mabala was covered in silence. Posori lay by the river, his body trembling, his mouth moving soundlessly as if he were trying to speak. The villagers gathered around him, whispering and glancing nervously at Chief Kapsawa. "What did you see, Posori? What was in the box?" Chief Kapsawa asked, his voice firm but filled with fear. Posori's eyes darted around wildly, and then, with a final shiver, he fainted. "We must close the box properly," Elder Kanda said urgently. "Whatever curse has been released must be sealed before it spreads." Chief Kapsawa, Elder Kanda, and a few brave men entered the chief's hut. The golden rope still lay beside the mysterious box. It sat on the table, glowing faintly as if it were alive. "Do not touch it with your bare hands," Elder Kanda warned. Using a piece of cloth, Chief Kapsawa carefully tied the golden rope back around the box. As he did, the faint glow disappeared, and the air in the hut felt lighter. But the damage was already done. By sunset, strange things began happening in Mabala. Chickens refused to eat, goats bleated endlessly, and a heavy fog rolled in from the forest, covering the village in a damp chill. Worse still, people began falling sick. First, it was Posori, then 2 children, then more villagers. They lay in their huts, sweating and shaking, their eyes wide with fear. "It's the box," the villagers whispered. "The curse is spreading." Desperate and afraid, Chief Kapsawa called an emergency meeting in the village square. "We cannot let fear control us," he said. "The woman in the red veil promised to return today. We must wait for her." But not everyone agreed. Some villagers, led by a hot-tempered young man named Musa, shouted back, What if she doesn't return? What if she cursed us on purpose? Musa said angrily. We must destroy the box. No, Elder Kanda shouted. Destroying it might make things worse. We must wait. The villagers were divided. Some wanted to wait for the woman, while others wanted to take matters into their own hands. Suddenly, a strong wind blew through the village, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed from the forest. The woman, a child, cried. Everyone turned toward the edge of the forest, and there she was, the mysterious woman with the red veil. Her gown flowed in the wind, and her presence was as chilling as the night air. Why did you disobey me? She said softly, her voice calm but firm. The villagers fell silent, their eyes filled with guilt and fear. I warned you, she continued. And now, the price must be paid. The woman in the red veil stepped into the village square, her presence commanding silence. The wind carried her words, making them sound louder than they should have been. Who opened the box? She asked, her voice calm yet sharp like a blade. The villagers shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting towards the chief, then to Elder Kanda, and finally to where Posori lay on a mat, still trembling and pale. The woman raised her hand, and the crowd parted, revealing Posori. She walked up to him and knelt beside his frail body. You allowed your curiosity to break the sacred rule, she said softly. But you are not the only one who must bear the burden. A single act of disobedience can poison an entire well. Chief Kapsawa stepped forward, his voice steady but pleading. Please, great lady, have mercy on our village. We were foolish, but we meant no harm. Tell us how to make this right. The woman stood and turned towards the chief. The curse can only be lifted if a sacrifice is made. A life for a life. Gasps erupted from the villagers. Mothers clutched their children tighter, and men exchanged nervous glances. What kind of sacrifice? Chief Kapsawa asked cautiously. The one who opened the box must willingly give up their life, the woman said. Only then will the sickness leave this village, and peace will return. The villagers turned their eyes to Posori. His weak body trembled as if he understood every word. But he is too weak, Elder Kanda cried. He can barely lift his head. The woman with the red veil nodded solemnly. Then the village must decide. Someone must take his place willingly, or the sickness will consume you all. The villagers gathered in the square under the pale moonlight. A heavy silence hung over them as they debated what to do. We cannot let Posori die like this, said Elder Kanda. But who among us is willing to take his place? Another voice replied. Musa, the hot-tempered young man, stood up. This is madness. How do we even know she speaks the truth? What if she's lying? What if we give a life, and the curse doesn't end? Chief Kapsawa raised his hand for silence. Doubt will not save us, Musa. Whether we believe her or not, the sickness is real, and it's spreading. The crowd began murmuring again until a quiet voice rose above the noise. I will go. All eyes turned to a young woman standing at the back of the crowd. It was Fatmata, a kind-hearted girl who often cared for the village children. No, Fatmata, her mother cried, rushing to her side. Fatmata stepped forward, her face calm. If my life can save everyone else, then it is a price worth paying. The villagers stared at her, some with admiration, others with tears in their eyes. The woman with the red veil stepped forward. Brave girl, she said softly. If you are sure, come with me. Fatmata nodded, her eyes steady. She followed the woman into the forest, her figure disappearing into the shadows. The villagers watched in silence, the night swallowing both the woman in red and their beloved Fatmata. The night was long and heavy. No one slept. Mothers held their children, and fathers sat by their doorsteps, staring into the distance. But as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, something changed. The fog lifted. The animals began to move again, and the air felt lighter. Poor Sori, who had been trembling and silent for days, suddenly sat up and spoke. "The sickness, it's gone." Cheers erupted in the village square. Families hugged each other, and tears flowed freely. The woman in the red veil had kept her word. But Fatmata was gone. The villagers built a small shrine at the edge of the forest in her memory. They placed flowers and lit candles, whispering prayers of gratitude and sorrow. Just as the sun rose high in the sky, a faint breeze swept through the village square, carrying a voice, soft and distant. "Beware of blind trust, the choices you make today will shape you tomorrow." And just like that, the breeze faded, leaving behind only the distant sound of birdsong and the promise of a new day. Months passed in Mabala. The village slowly returned to normal, though the memory of Fatmata's sacrifice weighed heavily on everyone's heart. The sickness was gone, but the villagers often found themselves gazing toward the edge of the forest as if waiting for the woman in the red veil to return. Chief Kapsawa, though relieved that the curse had been lifted, couldn't shake the feeling that the woman's warning still echoed in the village. "Beware of blind trust," she had said. He often found himself pondering those words, wondering if there was more to the tale than they had realized. One evening, as the village gathered around the evening fire, Elder Kanda spoke solemnly. "We must not forget what we've learned. The price of curiosity and disobedience is steep, but we must also understand that our actions, both good and bad, ripple far beyond our village. Perhaps the woman did not come merely to curse us, but to teach us about the balance of life." The villagers nodded, each of them reflecting on their own role in the events. Some had lost their loved ones, while others felt the burden of guilt for not having done more to prevent the curse. As the days passed, life in Mabala seemed to calm. But one person, Musa, never truly recovered from the loss of Fatmata. His anger toward the mysterious woman in the red veil remained, and he began questioning everything. Was the sacrifice truly necessary? Was there another way? One night, as the moonlight bathed the village in silver, Musa ventured into the forest, determined to find the woman and confront her. The villagers tried to stop him, warning him against venturing into the woods alone, but Musa was set on his path. He walked deep into the forest, where the trees grew thick and the air grew heavy with the scent of earth and old magic. The deeper he went, the more unsettled he became, but he pressed on, guided only by his anger and his need for answers. After hours of walking, he stumbled upon a clearing bed in eerie light. There, standing in the counter, was the woman with the red veil. Her gown shimmered as though it were woven from the very fabric of the night itself. "Musa," she said, her voice as soft as the wind. "I knew you would come." "Why?" Musa demanded, his voice shaking with emotion. "Why did you make Fatmata die? Why couldn't you spare her?" The woman with the red veil regarded him silently for a. Musa returned to the village the next morning, his face pale but his heart lighter than it had been in months. He did not speak of his encounter with the woman in the red veil, but something had shifted within him. He realized that his anger had only kept him in the past, bound to the memory of Fatmata's sacrifice, while the village moved forward. Over time, the villagers began to rebuild their lives, cherishing the lessons they had learned. Elder Kanda, now older and wiser, often told stories of their trials, not just as a warning, but as a way to remind everyone of the fragility of life. Musa, too, found peace, though it was a long road. He walked alongside the others to cultivate the land and care for the children. He had learned to forgive, both himself and the mysterious woman who had appeared in their lives. As for the woman in the red veil, she never returned. But her lessons lingered, passed down through generations. And the village of Mabala, though forever changed, flourished once more, its people wise to the delicate balance between fate and choice. As the seasons changed, life in Mabala continued. The woman's red veil became a symbol of caution, of sacrifice, and of the power of choice. Whether or not the woman had truly been a goddess, a spirit, or something else, no one could say for certain. But her story lived on, woven into the fabric of the village's history. And in the quiet of the night, when the wind rustled through the trees, the villagers sometimes whispered her name, wondering if she was still watching over them, or if perhaps, somewhere out there, she was waiting for another village to teach the lessons she had once shared. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and share more stories like this. Stay in touch with Habs African Stories. See you again.